His voice awoke something deep inside her, and now the alien Catgirl once more. Rayan lived alone at the edge of a forgotten mining colony. He worked inside an old comms tower filled with broken machines, rusted wires, and dust that never seemed to clear. No one visited this part of the desert anymore, not since the mines dried up and the workers left. But Rayan stayed, fixing what others abandoned, trying to earn a few credits for spare parts and old tech. He liked silence, or at least, he used to. One evening, the sun dipped low, turning the sky orange and blood red. Rayan found an old emergency broadcast unit in a half-buried crate. It was dented, but mostly intact. Curious, he cleaned it up and connected it to the old satellite dish outside. It took hours, but finally, the lights blinked green. The signal was ready. He pressed the mic button, his voice echoing slightly in the empty room. "If someone hears this, you're not alone," he said with a slight smile, not expecting any answer. It was just a test, just habit, just noise to fill the quiet. He repeated it once more. "If someone hears this, you're not alone," then leaned back in the old chair inside. What Rayan didn't know was that far away beyond the dunes and hills someone heard it. High in the Rocky Mountains, inside a narrow cave, a pair of feline ears twitched. Kira, an alien girl with soft fur along her arms, glowing eyes, and sharp claws, raised her head. She was thin, her stomach empty, her clothes torn and patched, but her senses were still sharp. And that voice, it cut through the cold inside her, like fire. She had been hiding from slavers for weeks. They had taken her people, sold them, scattered them across distant planets. Kira escaped, but barely. She trusted no one, avoided cities, and spoke to no living soul. But now, she had heard him, not just the words, the sound of his voice deep, kind, not like her people's, or the cruel bark of her hunters. It stirred something inside her chest, something strange. She didn't understand it, but she wanted more. She didn't sleep that night. The next morning Rayan repaired another panel, unaware of the ripple his voice had caused. He didn't know a pair of glowing eyes were watching his tower from the hills. He didn't know someone was walking toward him barefoot, cautious, but determined. He kept talking into the system, reading old Earth stories out loud to test the mic. He laughed once at a funny paragraph, not knowing that even his laugh reached the ears of someone broken. By the time the third sunset came, Kira stood just outside the comms tower. She was hidden behind a pile of old scrap, staring at the door. She watched the man through a cracked window, saw his lips move, heard his voice echo in the static. Her heart pounded, her claws curled tightly. She should run, but her feet wouldn't move. And then, the door creaked open. Rayan had heard something. Outside, a faint scratch, like claws brushing metal. He grabbed his light and stepped out, shining it into the growing dark. There, standing still, like a statue, was the strangest girl he'd ever seen. Her skin was pale gold, her hair silver white. She had long ears like a cat's, flicking at every sound, and a tail that twitched behind her. She looked young, but her eyes looked older than stars. Rayan lowered the light, not wanting to scare her. He took one step forward, then stopped when she flinched. "It's okay," he said softly. "I won't hurt you." Kira's eyes locked onto his lips as he spoke. Her pupils widened, her breathing quickened. That voice again, warm and clear. "I heard you," she whispered, her voice rough and unused. "Your voice. It found me." Rayan blinked, confused. "You heard the beacon?" She nodded slowly. "I walked for 2 nights. I didn't stop. I had to know if you were real." Rayan didn't know what to say. She looked exhausted, her hands shaking, her feet cut from rocks, but her eyes never left his face. Something about her stare made him feel seen. He stepped aside and opened the door wide. "Come in," he said gently. "You're safe here." Kira hesitated, then took a small step forward, then another, and just like that, she entered his world. Neither of them knew it yet, but that one sentence he spoke into an old machine meant only to test a signal. had changed both their lives forever. Because Kira wasn't just any alien, and Rayan's voice had awakened something ancient and hidden inside her. And now, she wanted more. The wind howled outside the tower as night fell, carrying sand that scratched against the metal walls. But inside it was quiet, warm, and dimly lit by a single hanging light bulb. Rayan watched the girl sitting across from him on a pile of blankets. She hadn't spoken much since stepping inside, but her eyes, those glowing, feline eyes, never stopped watching him. Her tail curled tightly around her legs, like a protective rope. Her ears twitched with every sound he made, not with fear anymore, but something else he couldn't place. Curiosity maybe, or something deeper, she didn't eat right away. Not until he stepped back and let her feel safe. Only then did she pick at the ration bar he'd handed her. Small bites, slow chewing, like she wasn't used to it. When she finished, she looked up at him again and whispered, "Your voice." He tilted his head, unsure what she meant. "It's not like others," she said slowly, like every word was being translated carefully in her mind before leaving her lips. "It calms something inside me." Rayan blinked, unsure how to respond. No one had ever said anything like that to him before. Not human, definitely not alien. "I'm just an old tech guy," he said with a soft chuckle. "Nothing special." She tilted her head. "But your sound, it's warm." She touched her chest lightly. "Here, I feel it here." She wrapped the blanket tighter around herself, hiding her arms but leaving her face exposed. Her eyes scanned his every move. And when he spoke again to ask her name, she took a sharp breath like she'd been struck. "Kira," she finally answered, her voice soft, almost fragile. "My name is Kira." Rayan nodded, repeating it gently. "Kira," she shivered, not from cold, but from the way he said it. "Say it again," she said suddenly, surprising them both. He hesitated, then smiled and spoke it once more. "Kira, this time." Her ears lowered slightly, her tail loosened, and she exhaled like something heavy had lifted from her. It was strange, he thought, how much her body responded to sound, not words, but tone, frequency, rhythm. It was as if his voice hit something inside her that she didn't understand, something buried under pain and fear and loneliness. The silence grew between them, not awkward, just waiting. Like two people sitting on opposite sides of a bridge being built slowly with every breath. "Why did you come?" he asked softly. Her eyes flickered toward the radio unit in the corner. "Your voice found me," she said again. "When I heard it, I wasn't scared. For the first time, I wanted to follow it." Rayan sat down across from her, still keeping a bit of distance, not wanting to make her feel trapped. "You don't have to stay if you don't want to," he said gently. "But you're welcome to rest here as long as you need." She stared at him in silence, then nodded once. Slow and certain, "I'll stay." The generator hummed softly. As Rayan got up to check the heat, Kira's eyes followed him, her ears catching every sound, his steps, his breaths, even the tiny clicks of buttons on the heater controls. But it wasn't the movement she focused on. It was still his voice, every time he spoke. Even when muttering to himself, her body reacted like a memory was waking inside her skin. She curled up tighter on the blankets, eyes half-lidded. "Keep speaking," she murmured, not even realizing the words had slipped from her mouth. "Why?" he asked with a faint smile, but she didn't answer directly. She just closed her eyes and whispered, "It keeps the bad thoughts away." That night, she slept curled like a kitten in the corner, and Rayan read aloud from an old Earth book, just to keep the silence from returning. He didn't think she was really listening, not after she stopped responding. But when he glanced over, he saw her tail slowly moving with the rhythm of his words, her breathing steady and calm. Something about this girl, this strange half-wild Catgirl from the mountains, touched a part of him he didn't know was still alive. She wasn't just hiding from danger. She was drawn to something deeper, something she didn't understand yet, but it began the moment she heard him say, "You're not alone." And now, even in sleep, she clung to those words like a lifeline, unaware that every time he said her name, It was rewriting her story, one sound at a time. The sun rose slow and pale the next morning, casting weak light through the dusty glass panels of the Cum's tower. Rayan stretched with a groan and walked toward the corner where Kira had fallen asleep, but he stopped when he saw her. She wasn't sleeping anymore. She was just sitting there, eyes open, watching him again. She hadn't moved much in the night, just shifted positions slightly, her tail now loosely draped beside her, her hands resting on her knees, but there was something different in her expressions, something softer, less afraid, more focused. She looked at him the way someone listens to a melody they don't want to forget. Rayan smiled and offered her a piece of warm flatbread he had heated over the small electric plate. She took it with a small nod and murmured, "Thank you." Her voice was clearer today, less hesitant, but still quiet, like she was afraid the walls might echo her too loudly. He decided to lighten the mood and told her a silly story about a broken-down robot that kept asking him for coffee, not fuel, just coffee, because of a faulty chip. When he reached the punchline and laughed, expecting her to stay quiet like before, something strange happened. Kira flinched not in fear but in shock. Her eyes widened and her ears lowered slightly, and then she froze, staring at him, not blinking. Her fingers gripped the flatbread tighter. Rayan stopped laughing, concerned. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. Kira blinked slowly, then looked away, cheeks slightly pink. "Do it again," she whispered, his brows furrowed. "What? That sound?" she said, glancing back at him. "Your laugh?" "Do it again." He let out a softer chuckle this time, more confused than amused, and she gasped an actual, audible gasp as if the sound struck something deep inside her. She brought her hand to her chest, her breathing quick and uneven. "What's happening to me?" she asked more to herself than to him. "Why does your sound make me feel like this?" Rayan sat down across from her, the humor fading, replaced by curiosity and concern. "Like what?" he asked carefully. Kira looked at him, trembling slightly. "Safe," she said, "but also warm and light-headed, like the world stops spinning when you speak." He swallowed hard, unsure what to say. This wasn't just about fear anymore, or survival. Her reaction was deeper, something more primal or emotional. "Have you ever heard anyone laugh before?" he asked. She shook her head. "Not like that." The way she stared at him now, it wasn't just wonder, it was hunger, but not for food. It was like she had been starving for kindness, sound, comfort, and his voice had become her only source of it. She moved closer without realizing, her body following instinct more than thought, her tail brushing lightly across the floor. "I don't understand this feeling," she whispered again. "I've been alone so long." "Your voice is the only thing that doesn't hurt." Rayan wanted to reach out, to touch her hand or shoulder, but he didn't, not yet. She was still healing, still raw from whatever had broken her before she came here, but even with the space between them, it felt like they were growing closer, not with touch, but with sound. Every word he spoke added a new piece to the invisible bridge between them. Kira's ears flicked suddenly, catching a noise outside. She rose on all fours like a startled cat, her body tense. "Relax," Rayan said calmly. "It's just wind." His tone was even, soothing, and slowly, her muscles relaxed again. She exhaled and looked down, embarrassed by her reaction. "Your voice tells me when to breathe," she said without thinking, then blinked in surprise at her own words that made him chuckle again and again. Her body reacted, her tail curled and her eyes closed briefly, like the sound had brushed her skin. "You shouldn't laugh like that," she said, but her voice wasn't angry. It was breathless. "It's dangerous." He smiled gently. "You want me to stop?" "No," she said quickly. "Never." The sun rose higher, but neither of them noticed. For the first time since she arrived, Kira sat without her blanket, her shoulders exposed, her claws retracted. She was still a mystery to Rayan, a strange alien girl with ears like fire and eyes like the stars. But somehow, She wasn't a stranger anymore. She didn't know the word for what was happening to her, and he didn't either. But something was unfolding between them, slow, warm, alive, and it had all started with a simple human voice in the dark. Now it was growing into something neither of them could explain, and neither of them wanted to lose. The night brought cold winds again, but Kira didn't shiver this time. She was lying near the radio panel, curled up in a tight little shape, her tail tucked under her chin. Her eyes were closed, but her ears stayed alert, always listening. Rayan sat nearby, reading softly from a manual, just to pass the time. His voice smooth and even. She wasn't even listening to the words, just the sound. Then the storm hit. Wind slammed against the tower walls, and lightning flashed far across the desert. Kira bolted upright, breath ragged, claws out, her fur standing on end. Her eyes were wild. But she wasn't looking at the storm, she was looking into a memory. She mumbled in a language he didn't understand, her body trembling violently. Rayan moved toward her slowly, crouched beside her, and spoke softly. "It's okay," he said. "You're safe." The words barely reached her, but the tone steady, human, familiar, cut through the fear like a blade. She blinked, her claws lowering, her breathing slowing, her eyes finding his face. "Speak," she whispered, voice shaking. "Please, speak again." So he did. He told her nonsense things about the time he once fried a console because he spilled coffee, about the smell of fresh earth rain, about how his sister used to sing badly in the shower. Kira stared at him like every word was a lifeline, like each sentence pulled her farther from the storm inside her mind. And then, something unexpected happened. A sound rose from deep in her chest, soft, rhythmic, like a hum. Rayan paused, confused, until he realized she was purring. She didn't notice it at first, but he did. And when she finally heard herself, she gasped and slapped her hand over her mouth. Her cheeks turned red, her ears folded back, and she turned away, clearly embarrassed. "I didn't mean to," she whispered, but he smiled, voice gentle. "Why hide it?" "I haven't purred since I was little," she said, almost ashamed. "Since before the slavers, before everything." She pulled the blanket tighter, like it could hide her emotions. But he just kept speaking, and slowly, her shoulders relaxed again. Without realizing it, she crawled closer to him. Drawn to the source of the sound, she pressed her forehead to his shoulder and whispered, "Don't stop, even if I fall asleep. Keep talking." He didn't say no. He wrapped one arm around her without thinking, and for the first time, she didn't flinch. Her body melted into his side, small and warm. The sound in her chest returned, deeper this time, more certain, and Rayan felt it vibrate softly against him. A strange comfort he never knew he needed. The storm outside roared on, but the room inside felt still. She fell asleep against him, purring softly like a whisper from a different world, and Rayan sat there, whispering stories into the night, not because she asked him to, but because now he wanted to. Something had shifted between them, not with touch, not with a kiss, not with promises, but with the simple power of a voice that made her believe she wasn't alone anymore. A sound that chased away monsters, that turned memories into mist, that wrapped around her heart and stayed there. Rayan didn't understand it yet, but he had spoken to dozens of machines in his life, hundreds of broken circuits. None of them had ever responded the way this strange girl did. None had ever leaned into him in silence and said so much without a word. And deep inside her, Kira was starting to believe in something again, not in magic, not in heroes, but in him, or more exactly, in his voice, because it wasn't just healing hurt, was changing her, piece by piece, breath by breath, one whisper at a time. The morning light crept in slow, soft gold brushing across Kira's cheek. She blinked awake, realizing she was still leaning against Rayan, her face resting near his shoulder. He hadn't moved all night. Still sitting there with his eyes closed, softly breathing. His arm was draped gently around her, back not possessive, just steady, like a shield she didn't know she wanted. She pulled away carefully, heart racing as she stood up and stretched. Her tail twitched nervously as she looked at him, wondering if he'd remember how she'd curled into him like a child. But when his eyes opened, and he gave her that warm, sleepy smile, she didn't feel embarrassed. She felt seen. Later that day, Rayan found an old voice scanner buried in a rusted crate. It was a joke, really an old Earth tool meant to translate accents or mimic voices. He cleaned it, calibrated it, and turned to Kira, who was now sitting cross-legged near the door. Tail swaying lazily, he smiled. Want to hear how you sound through a human filter? She tilted her head, amused but unsure. Is it safe? Only dangerous to egos, he joked, and she actually chuckled. He pressed record. Said her name slowly. Kira then played it back. The device repeated the sound in perfect mimicry, but it was colder, empty, without the soul his voice carried. Kira flinched, ears lowering slightly. That's not right. He raised a brow. It's just a copy. She stood, walked over, and took the device from his hand, holding it close. Say it again. This time, he leaned forward, spoke, softly, like it was a secret only meant for her. Kira, her breath hitched, her knees nearly gave way, and she dropped onto the floor beside him. Her claws gripped her thighs as her ears flattened, and her tail whipped once before curling around her waist. Rayan leaned forward, worried. Did I hurt you? She shook her head quickly, eyes shut. Tight. No. It's too much. He backed off slightly, but couldn't help asking, what is... She looked up, eyes burning like starlight. When you say my name like that, my body reacts. My heart runs. My head spins. He said nothing. Afraid to break the moment, she took a shaky breath. It's not just comfort anymore. It's something else. The air between them felt charged, filled with things unspoken but deeply felt. Then, Kira whispered, your voice is inside me now. He blinked, unsure if he heard her right. She nodded, as if reading his mind. Even when you're quiet, I hear it, like a song trapped under my skin. She leaned forward slowly, close enough to feel his warmth, and gently placed her hand on his chest. Say something, she whispered. Anything. His voice came out softer than he expected. I'm here. Her fingers curled into his shirt, her breathing shallow. I know, she said, and smiled small but real, like sunlight peeking through clouds. They sat there for a long time, not touching more than that, not needing to. Every word he spoke seemed to reach somewhere no one else ever had, and Rayan, looking into her eyes, knew something had changed again. It wasn't just Kira's body reacting, it was her heart, her soul. She wasn't just drawn to him. She was bonding in a way far deeper than either of them understood yet. Outside, the wind picked up dust and silence, but inside the tower, a whisper had lit a fire neither of them knew how to put out, and Kira, once hunted, once voiceless, was now asking for something not even she could explain. Not food, not shelter, not safety, but more of him. More of the voice that awakened the hunger she never knew she had. The quiet didn't last. Rayan was adjusting the tower's satellite when he noticed the long-range alert flashing red. A signal had been intercepted, a tracking pulse, short but sharp. His stomach dropped. He checked the logs, then double-checked. Someone had pinged the tower's coordinates, and it wasn't from any rescue beacon. It was a hunter's mark. Inside, Kira felt it too before he said a word. Her ears twitched violently. Her back arched like she'd been struck by invisible claws. She stood without a word and walked to the window, her eyes scanning the far horizon. Slavers, she said softly, voice flat but filled with old fear. They're coming. Rayan joined her at the window, trying to see what she saw. There's still time, he said, but Kira shook her head. They don't need much, she whispered. They know I'm here. She turned to him, eyes serious now, no tremble. No shy glances, only the sharp gaze of a hunted creature choosing whether to fight or run. But Rayan didn't panic. He touched the old emergency signal panel and powered down everything with a single flick, then turned to her and said calmly, "We'll leave before they arrive." Kira blinked, confused. "You'll come with me? You think I'd let them take you?" he said, as if the answer was obvious. She looked away, her voice softer. "Most would." They packed quickly, only what they could carry. The desert outside was cruel, dry, brutal, endless, but it was safer than waiting. As they stepped out, Kira hesitated, then turned back to the tower. "I used to dream of dying alone," she whispered. "Now I'm scared, because I don't want to lose what I just found." They began walking into the twilight, their shadows long. They didn't talk for a while, but then Rayan broke the silence. "You know your people weren't wrong. Your kind hears differently." She looked at him, puzzled. He tapped his chest. "But maybe it's not the ears that matter. Maybe it's the heart that listens deeper." Kira smiled, faint but bright. "Then my heart is loud." As night came, they found a cave to rest in. Kira sat near the entrance, tail curled tight, her body alert, but her eyes kept shifting back to him. She crawled over slowly, stopping, close, not touching, but close enough to feel his breath. "Speak," she whispered. "Please," he said her name again, soft as ever. She let out a breath like she'd been underwater too long. "I don't understand why this happens to me," she said. "When you speak, it changes everything inside." He met her gaze. "Then I'll keep speaking until you understand." She blinked fast, something shimmering in her eyes that wasn't fear. She leaned forward until their foreheads touched, then whispered into the silence, "If they take me, will you say my name one more time, loud enough for the stars to hear?" Rayan didn't answer right away. He placed his hand gently over hers and said only one thing. "I'll say it every day until you come back." But what neither of them knew was that his voice, his frequency, his tone had already affected more than just her heart. It had interfered with the slaver's tech, corrupted the tracker codes. When they scanned again, the signal returned, nothing but static, somehow, without even trying. Rayan's voice had become more than comfort. It had become protection, and Kira, curled up beside him in the dark, whispered to herself the same truth again and again. "It's not magic. It's him." And that night, she fell asleep, not as prey, not as a runaway, but as something new, anchored, bonded, claimed by a sound that refused to let her go. The stars above were endless, tiny lights scattered across the black sky. But Kira wasn't looking at them. She sat beside a small fire, her knees drawn close, tail curled around her ankles. Her eyes were fixed on Rayan, who sat across from her, fiddling with a broken sensor, his face lit by flickering orange light. She didn't speak, just listened, as he quietly hummed an old earth tune under his breath. It wasn't even a song, just fragments of melody, low and calm, but it made her chest tighten, her breath slow. She felt it again, that pull deep in her bones. The part of her that had once gone numb was now wide awake. She crawled closer, each movement slow, deliberate, her claws barely touching the ground. Rayan glanced up, surprised by how close she was now. "You okay?" he asked, voice gentle as always. She didn't answer right away, instead watching his mouth as he spoke. Then she whispered, "Say something." He smiled faintly. "You never run out of curiosity, huh?" "I ran out of everything else," she replied softly. "Hope, safety, even my own name." She looked down, then back at him. "But you gave it back with your voice." He reached forward slowly, brushing a lock of silver hair from her face. The touch was light, respectful, but it made her shiver, not in fear, but in anticipation. Then he said her name again, "Kira," and her entire body responded. A small gasp escaped her lips, and she leaned into his hand without thinking. Her pupils widened, her breath shaky. "I don't want just your voice anymore," she whispered. "I want more." Rayan's fingers stilled, his throat tightened. "You're sure?" he asked, not because he doubted her, but because he cared. She nodded slowly. I don't know what this is yet, but I know it started with your voice and grew into something I can't live without. The fire crackled quietly between them, but the space had already closed. She reached up and gently took his hand, guiding it to her chest. Can you feel that? She asked. Her heartbeat was fast, wild, but steady beneath his palm. It beats harder when you speak, like it's answering you. Rayan said nothing for a moment, overwhelmed by the weight of what she just shared. Then he leaned close enough for her to feel his breath on her cheek, and he whispered her name one more time, slower, deeper. Filled with emotion he could no longer hide, Kira let out a breath that turned into a soft sound, half sigh, half purr. Then she gently rested her forehead against his. They stayed like that, unmoving, eyes closed, breath shared. There were no vows, no promises, no need for them, because in that moment, the connection was real, forged not by force, or need, or desperation, but by something as simple and as powerful as a voice that spoke straight to the soul. By dawn, they were still there together. The slavers never came back, their signal jammed, their trail lost, and the galaxy would never know what had bloomed in that quiet place between silence and sound. But Kira knew, and Rayan knew, it wasn't just survival anymore, it was a beginning. She had followed a voice through the darkness. Now she followed it into the light, and as the sun rose, painting her silver hair gold, she whispered one thing back to him for the first time. Say it again. And he did. Again, and again, and again, until it wasn't just his voice inside her anymore. It was home.